This is Inner Healing Paths podcast. Here we discuss the healing of the mind, body, soul, and spirit through a variety of different paths. We have emotional and spiritually minded conversations centering on ancestral healing, psychology, astrology, yoga, meditation, magic, and indigenous spiritual practices of the world. I am your host, Rosa Shetty, and I am so happy you are here. Welcome. Welcome back to Inner Healing Paths. I am your host, Rosa, and this episode is with the wonderful Asha Frost. Asha is a medicine woman, a healer, a spiritual mentor, and a writer. She is so wise, and she was so generous in sharing all of her wisdom with us. So Asha talks about some of her childhood memories and specifically how she communicated with her ancestors at a very young age and how over time this was lost and the steps that she took to reclaim this medicine, to reclaim her gifts. Asha has a brand new book coming up. It's titled You Are the Medicine. So she shares about her book and everything that went into manifesting this amazing work. And if you feel called to, please check it out. It is available on Amazon on pre-sale, and it will be officially out after March 15th. So let's all support her. And if you find this conversation encouraging and helpful on your journey, please leave us a review. As you know, this really helps boost our presence here on Apple Podcast. So without further ado, here's the interview with Asha Frost. Take a listen. Hi, Asha. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for your time, for taking the time to be here and to share with me and with our listeners. So to get started, for those of you that, for our listeners that are not familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about where you're from and the healing work that you do?
Sure. So I am from Nyash-Ngangaming, which is called Cape Croker, and my ancestors are from all of the lands across what is now known as Ontario. I'm an Anishinaabe, and my spirit name is She Who Walks with the Thunderbirds. And that's sort of, I guess, who I am and the lands that I'm connected to. I'm coming from the lands of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee peoples. And as an Anishinaabe woman and medicine person, I identify with my connection to spirit and my ancestors and all of the beings and the healing work that I do in the world. I have been a healer for 2 decades in private practice, and then I moved my healing online to a global membership. And a lot of it is in the energetic realms. I was a homeopath for many years, for about 15 years in a private practice, and then moved some medicine work into that, into sort of seeing clients one-on-one, and then group. So it just kind of got bigger and bigger. And I love working with energetic medicine in group settings. That's like my favorite thing to do in circle work. And yeah, so it's sort of like the energy realms, and I was a homeopath, and then working with spirit and the ancestral medicine is my jam. It's like my favorite thing to do.
Wow, it's so fascinating. And how did you even get started in this spirit realm? How did you get introduced to that? I know you mentioned being a homeopathic, but it sounds like your work is shifted a bit, right? And how it started and then what has become. How did that initiation happen for you, getting introduced to the spirit realm?
Well, I think I was always connected as a child. I would have ancestors come and visit me in my room, and it would freak me out. I'd have these dark figures. Well, they appeared as dark, and I wouldn't know who was coming or why they were coming until I got a little bit older. So I was also a dreamer, and I was highly sensitive, as I think some people can relate to that. So just feeling everything, knowing what people were thinking and feeling before they shared it or they wouldn't share it. Kind of a healer in my environment of that. I want to say it's almost like a hypervigilance and sensitive to energy, right? Of like what's going on, probably to provide a little bit of safety in my own system because I felt so deeply. So that's how it started. And then I got sick when I was 17. I was diagnosed with lupus. And that was sort of a wake up call for me of like, because I was colonized, my grandparents were in residential school, and um, our way of thinking and being. I mean, even though the indigenous thread of that was like underneath everything, it was lost and forgotten and suppressed and oppressed with the attempted genocide of our people. So at 17, something was like sparked inside of me, like there's some remembering here, and come back to the earth, come back to your ancestors teachings, come back to the spirit world. Even though the Catholic Church ultimately had taken a lot of those things from my lineage, it started this whole journey of reclamation. And it was already there. Like I was that child sensitive self who was seeing ancestors in spirit. It was already there. It was just not quite uncovered yet. So that was the beginning of that. And really it was about going on a journey to heal myself. And through that journey, I've met incredible healers and teachers and wisdom keepers, that have helped me unlock my own wisdom. And in that, then it becomes teachings, that it becomes things I want to share with the world. But it really comes down to, how can I heal myself? How can I heal my body? What do I need to remember so that I can walk in the best way that I know how?
It was one thing that you mentioned right now is through your own healing, and I think that's for a lot of folks that get in, that become healers or any type of healing work that they do. A lot of times is with that intention to heal themselves, whether
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, physically, or or both, right? So I think it's definitely a window, in terms of finding our calling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is I need to heal myself, and then we stumble upon this fascinating field and we delve in. And in coming from that place, as a therapist, I think very much my journey as a therapist started with trying to understand what has happened to me, and make sense of the emotional effects of my childhood, and all that. And I feel that so many healers, regardless of the background and what they specifically do, it's a window, right? It's a window to your healing and a window to your calling and the gifts,
Mm-hmm.
and to share your gifts, right? Because ultimately we have gifts to share because of what we went through.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, yeah. So can you tell or share with us a little bit about, I know you have a book out and there's another one coming, right? You have a new book coming.
No, this is a new, it's
Oh,
my
this
first
is
book.
this is
Yeah,
your first book?
this is
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah, the copy that I have is one of the galley copies, like the
Oh, this
public. Yeah, they sent it to me. So I have like one in my hands, but it's not the final copy. It's not coming out till March 15th.
Oh, okay. I thought you already had a book out and this was your second
No.
one. So, oh, well, this is like a big deal.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Tell us about your journey in writing this book, and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so it's called You Are the Medicine, and it actually started from a dream. I think I had a dream when I was in my early 20s of being a Hay House author. I just thought, oh, I learned so much from the books and the decks and all of those things. And of course, there was nobody on the stage that looked like me, and I couldn't relate. There was a lack of diversity in the folks that I was seeing sharing, but there was still some sort of seed planted. Like I could do that. Like I just felt like I could see myself on there, even though there wasn't anybody that looked like me. So that was my early 20s. And then, that dream just kind of I put it in the corner for a while. And then there became an opportunity where they had a diversity initiative and they were asking for submissions, like essay submissions, to get a spot to their writers workshop. And I thought, oh, well, this is a really great opportunity, like just to see what happens. So I wrote an essay, and it was based on a letter that I had written that had gone viral, called "Dear White Woman Who Wants to Be Like Me." And so it was written sort of similarly to that energy, because that had gone viral, and it was really like it just shook things up a little bit for communities. And then I got a spot. So it was like there was like 160 submissions and like 15 spots, and I got a spot to go to the writers workshop, and I took the weekend. And then when I got home, I'm like, I'm going to put everything into this proposal because I want this. So I spent about 7 months writing the book proposal and the framework of how I wanted it all to be laid out. And then the day before my birthday, I guess that was 2020, I got a call and they said, "You got a book deal." And yeah, it was so
Amazing.
good. So that was So
Oh my
exciting. It was so exciting.
goodness. Yeah, no, well, congratulations. I mean,
Thank you.
it's a big deal, especially for such a big publishing house, right? And I'm so glad they're making an effort to be more diverse and inclusive of other voices, right? Amplifying other voices from different backgrounds. And so excited for your book. The title sounds amazing, by the way. I already want to read it just with that
Thank you.
title. So tell us a little bit about your book and what what went into to doing this and what inspired you for this book.
Yeah, it's so I wanted to indigenize, like really indigenize it because I've read so many Hay House books and used the decks and all of those things. I realized there was just parts missing that didn't reflect me or my way of knowing and being. So I put storytelling really at the forefront. When I was a kid, my mom used to read this book called Tales of Nokomis, and Nokomis means grandmother in our language. And it was like all of the animals were alive, all of the plants were alive. There was just this like beautiful energy, and I thought I want to infuse it into my book. So there's some legends in my book that probably you wouldn't necessarily expect from a Hay House book, but it weaves together some legends that really show that all of creation is our kin. So there's that teaching from like a kind of a gentle way. And then, there's journeying because I love to do journeying, and it's based on the 13 moons. So there's 13 moon cycles in our year, even though there's not necessarily always 13 full moons. In our Ojibwe teachings, those 13 full moons are called different names, as some folks might know. Sometimes you hear the wolf moon or the pink moon or all those names. These are based on the lands that my ancestors are from and what was happening at that time, whether it's harvesting or planting or the animals that were coming out. So it's based on those moon names, and then an animal spirit. So I have an animal spirit associated with each of the moons, and there's a teaching. So it's very like this is the moon of January, and this is the animal that goes with it, and then this is the story. And this, I mean, my invitation is just to help you remember something about yourself. And I got really clear this week about what is the purpose, what is the spirit of this book. And I want folks, I want it to bring tears to people's eyes. I want them to remember who they are. And that sounds maybe a little fluffy, but I realized like after so much that I poured into that, if I've done that, then I've done my job. If people like are connected to it and they have tears rise up that remembers a part of their divinity, then I've done my job.
And and it sounds, I mean for what you shared, it just sounds like it was such a personal and intimate expression of because you mentioned these are some of the stories that you grew up with. I mean, that you're sharing your medicine essentially. You're sharing what your ancestors medicine with everyone. It's such a, I mean, that could be a very, it's a very intimate thing to share, right? Your
It is.
ancestors medicine that was given onto you. Did you ever feel, as you were writing this book, did you ever feel like wanting to shut down and not share it? And I hear a lot from folks that are putting themselves out there through books or through other ways, that sometimes there's a part within them that just wants to share it, and then there's the other part that, but this is so intimate, this is my grandmother's sayings, and they want to shut down. So it's like this back and forth of wanting to be seen and then wanting to hide. I,
Yes.
did that happen to you when you were writing this book? I mean, it just sounds so personal, with sharing your family's and ancestors' medicine.
Yes, I think yes, it did. And the interesting thing when it happened was there's two chapters of the book that speak about intergenerational harm and residential school trauma. And that's when it happened because I was thinking, why am I not experiencing writer's block? This is like it's flowing, it's flowing. And then all of a sudden it just stopped. And it was like, why can't I get these words out? Or how am I, maybe it just felt like a lot of responsibility. How am I going to speak this in a way that is going to land for people? Because that's the thing with Indigenous trauma too. It's like there's so much looking away. So are they going to be able to stay engaged with the truth? And that's what happened for these two chapters. I just got blocked. And it's interesting because I was doing some healing work at the time, and the facilitator said, there are forces beyond this, beyond your mind, that are trying to stop these words from coming out. It's just, forces that are greater than us that are trying to stop this. And that spoke to me because I thought, I'm not sure why this is happening. It's beyond me. So Yeah, it was more related to that versus like sharing. I'm really conscious and aware that a lot of what I share here is channeled from these beings that I call the grandmothers. Um, so it is sharing some of the things that have been passed down, but it's mostly my own spirit connection to the ancestors that live in the spirit world and creation. So that part doesn't feel as vulnerable, but the truth part, those pieces, and being a vehicle for sharing the truth does feel very vulnerable.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And you said the grandmothers.
Mhm.
I just I resonate with that because when I connect with my ancestors, I say my abuelitas, in Spanish, grandmothers, and I just talk to all of them, my abuelitas. So I just felt that, and I absolutely feel that, sometimes our fear, blocks. It sounds like there was a moment where you felt that fear, and it's like what's out there, and fear definitely blocks the medicine, right, to flow through.
Mhm.
But it's such a beautiful. I mean, you just said that, and I'm just like, wow, we're
Mm.
definitely on the same wavelength here. It's one of those things where you realize how much our ancestors actually want this to be shared, and because this is thousands of years back. This is not just our recent ancestors, right? This is medicine that has been, I think, you said, pushed away, suppressed, uh, you know attempted to just completely erase,
Mhm.
from the planet. So this is coming back now, and I think all of our ancestors are so happy that so many of us are waking up to this remembrance, right, and sharing it with the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's part of our, I mean, it's part of this, it's in our DNA, it's in our blood, it's in our bones. It's like we are part of a greater part of that history. And perhaps maybe we're meant to be the voices to bring what needs to be seen from them forward. So I love how you phrase that.
Yeah, and and I it's just even in social media, right? There seems to be a hunger for a lot of the younger generations to know about this, to read about it, to hear about it. There's a reflection happening. Maybe not many of them are engaging in ancestral healing work or connecting deeply with their ancestors. They're thinking about it, right? There's
Mhm.
the awareness of it now. It's becoming, I don't want to say mainstream, but it's becoming a little bit more known.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've noticed that too.
Oh, yes. I think, I mean, I've been doing this work for, again, almost 2 decades. And only recently, maybe the last 5 years, it has become like a hashtag or like a thing, right? So I can see that for sure. And I think that's a good thing. I love that people want to be more connected to their roots.
Absolutely, and I feel that it's needed, right?
Mhm.
What people are they're trying to heal, right? Like we were saying at the beginning, it's this part within them that wants to heal, and some of them may not even know. You had a very clear idea as to what you need to heal physically and or emotionally, But some folks, some younger, maybe younger folks, they don't really know, but they have this part within them that says something is not right. There's or they just gravitate to this and they don't even know why, right? And I see that as spirit calling them, calling them back to reconnect, to remember that they
Yeah.
they carry the medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, so my podcast is called Inner Healing Paths, and that's
Mm.
because there's so many paths that lead to healing. And from your perspective, and from the path that you walk, how does healing happen? And I'm talking like emotional, that, and physical, that holistic healing. How do you see healing happen from your line of work or from your perspective?
Mm. I mean, I think I've very viscerally seen how homeopathic remedies have helped healing happen. And I think that happens as a remembering again, this energetic frequency or vibration that matches the person to help them come back to the truth of who they are. I know, yeah, sometimes it doesn't sound, very scientific, but I've seen it in my own life with lupus and taking remedies when I haven't been able to walk or put my socks on or bend my arms or just been in really excruciating pain. And somehow the right remedy will reweave something within my system and say, come home to this vital force that is that healing energy. So I do believe we all have that vital force. I've seen it in thousands of people who have sat before me, like this pulse of it looks like a pulse of divine frequency, I guess. And then wounds and trauma and all the things kind of cause like a shakeup of that. So how can we bring it back into harmony, the best that we can? I see a lot of coming back to compassion, because I think that our world has a lot of shame. Shame can even be threaded through healing practices, right? Like, you're not enough. So I think that whole "you're not broken" truth is so important when we're doing healing and coming back to that, that in your shadow, in your darkness, in your, all of that is medicine too. All of that is needed and necessary and should not be shamed. It should just be seen. So I think validation, acknowledgement, holding space for all of the parts is so important. I mean, I guess that's what I've experienced. And I know I'm not the type of person to be like, my way's the right way. I always say, like, take what resonates, right? And leave the
Yeah,
rest.
absolutely. But that really resonates with me and just my approach, as coming as a therapist, I like you said it, the darker parts within us, shame and fear, and, because of the result of trauma and wounding, these parts have been at the forefront. But so many times, looking at these parts and connecting with these darker parts or these difficult parts is where transformation happens, right? By looking at these and sitting with the discomfort. Sometimes the energy of these, because these parts just want to be seen and validated. Sometimes when we actually look at them and connect with them, they actually lessen or soften, I should say.
Mm.
They soften the force in our everyday lives. So
Yeah.
that's, yeah, absolutely what you said just resonates. And I think it resonates with so many folks, because so many times we do try to run away from these big, scary, dark emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where a window, right? A window to healing can be.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. And when it comes to just your everyday practice, I know some listeners, they love to hear what healers do in terms of everyday things to help yourself and to maintain, your strength. What are some of the things that you do that help you just day to day, that help you stay grounded, stay connected to your medicine?
Yeah, I love salt baths. That's something that's essential from a very basic self-care place, is like, I need to take a salt bath every day. It's everything for me. And mostly because I think that energy hygiene piece, like, I'm very sensitive and I pick up a lot of the collective energy. So clearing constantly, I think, is like, really, I'm not obsessive about it, but I'll do my smudge in the morning with my sage and my sweetgrass. I do that throughout the day sometimes if things are getting heavy, or if I'm working with like a bigger group. And then taking that salt bath at the end of the day, that just like helps to clear all of it from me, and just I see it soaking out of my system. So those things are important. Being outside on the earth is just like that daily walk, is really important. I've got two young children, so sometimes it's loud here, and I need a lot of quiet for reflection and just to process a lot of the things that are happening for me. So I'd say that those things are really important. And in the past year and a bit, I've been really focused on like some somatic nervous system practices, because I find that being embodied, like actually shaking or breath work or giving space to things, is just essential, because things get trapped very easily in my cells in my body. So I'm just so much more aware now in the moment when that's happening, so it doesn't turn into illness. That's for me at least. If I don't tend to it, then it starts to build up. So I do a lot of shaking.
That's great. I mean, that is, I mean, I've read a lot about it, and it's so powerful because you're literally shifting your energy, getting the stuck energy moving, flowing, right? And which is
Yeah.
what so many paths and healings are about. Like acupuncture, right? It's about shifting energy, getting the energy moving. So I've read so much about just dance and movement and shaking, specifically how that is so activating for your nervous system. It kind of wakes it up
Mhm.
so your energy can flow, and literally you shake it off, right? Literally,
Yeah.
that's, yeah. And then you mentioned salt bath. So that's so interesting. Do you mean like just just Epsom salt, or what type of salt?
Yeah, I use sometimes like the Dead Sea salt or the pink salt.
Oh, oh, oh,
Or
wow.
magnesium flakes is my absolute favorite, actually. That's my favorite because your skin soaks that up and that magnesium just calms, right, and helps. So
Mm,
I will use anything that I have, but I need to use something earthy in the water to pull out, whether it's clay or salt or flakes like magnesium, minerals. That just feels really, really important to staying well.
oh, thank you for that. I'm gonna try that. I haven't done that, but it makes sense, right? It's very cleansing and energetically too, right? I could
Yes,
see that. Okay, thank you for that tip.
welcome.
And I'm also a mom, and I know life gets it gets loud, right? There's so much happening that needs to be tended to, of course, and this is our life. So it's hard to find that harmony with taking care of yourself, staying grounded, staying focused on your healing work, the work that you
Yeah,
need, and take care of little ones. It's not easy.
not.
Yeah, no. So I admire you in writing that book in the midst of that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I will say writing that book, writing this book during a pandemic, like when we went into lockdown here, my littlest was only 2, and I remember just like thinking, how am I going to write this? Because and we've been in lockdown here where I am like a lot, and there hasn't been that's the one thing I grieve a little bit that I haven't been able to go to like a cafe to write or go away somewhere that just felt like romantic somehow, it was just like literally on my kitchen table with my kids throwing, I don't know, Play-Doh and slime at each other. So it's definitely a different
Yeah,
experience. I hope I have another chance to write another book and then
you
it'll be
will.
different.
You will. Yeah, absolutely. I've heard this. I was listening to another podcast, and a couple of authors, they wrote a book together, and they mentioned the same thing, that they had this idea they were going to rent like a little cabin in the mountains. And it's a couple that they wrote a book together, so they had this idea of renting a cabin, going to the mountains for like a couple of weeks and writing in nature. And they had this whole plan, and then of course the pandemic hit, and that was just out the window, and it was just all the chaos that happened. So I think you'll have a chance to to make that dream of writing in in a cabin somewhere or in nature. It will
Yes.
come true. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, this was such a lovely conversation, and I really appreciate the wisdom that you shared with us. Your book sounds amazing, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. I love books. I love Hay House too, and I'm so glad that they're making an effort to be more inclusive, or at least to amplify other voices, right?
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Rosa. It's been
Yeah,
such a pleasure.
of course, of course. And for the folks that would love to get to know you a little bit more, and just learn more about the work that you do, how can they find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram probably the most often. So it's asha.frost on Instagram. And for my website's ashafrost.com. And then for the book, I do have this like free gift of a ceremony guide that goes along with it. So if you wanted to pre-order and get the gift, you can go to youarethemedicinebook.com.
Amazing. Thank you. And I'll include it in the show notes too,
Oh,
so folks
thank
can
you.
just click on it. Sounds great. Well, Asha, I would love to have you back some other time to talk again about all these things that we talked about today. There's so much to share, right, about this. We could talk about this forever.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Thank
so we'd
you.
love to have you back in the future. But thanks again, and hope to talk to you soon. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you found it healing and nourishing to your mind and soul. If there's a friend that you think would benefit from listening to this information, please share it. Share about our podcast. If you feel called to, please leave us a review, as this really, really helps boost our presence here in Apple Podcasts, and it makes it easier for others to find us. To stay up to date on new episode releases and special events and projects that I'm working on, you can follow us on Instagram at Inner Healing Paths Podcast. And you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to my website, which is rosashettylcsw.com. And I will include this information and links in the show notes. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing with you again next time.